I'll tell you what, then we'll go straight to the WWF. And Tito was already in the WWF for a spell, but this is the main one where he's on a run of, a dozen years or so. And the very first match that I can find he has in the WWF in this run is with Johnny Rodz. And we've never brought up Johnny Rodz before. He's still kicking. He's well into. I think he's well into his 80s and everything. Long time enhancement talent, jobber back in the old days. And he also had quite a reputation of schooling guys that needed to be schooled as well. But Johnny Rodz, what do you remember of him?
Oh, good guy, great performer. He looked habitual card player. One of Scolin's. There's one of the guys in Scolin's van. And they always had the card deck going, and then the cards out. And I had some. He was always a baby face for me, and I was the heel with him. So I had some great matches with him. Remember Worcester? We had when I was a champion. They thought he was going to take the belt a bunch of times, and So yeah, he was a hell of a worker. Had good runs other places where Vince Senior sent him out of the territory. Like SD and some of those other guys, Dave Johann and those other guys that he used to send on missions to other parts of the country to kind of to freshen them up for their TV. He was a Java in LA, Java something. He was like an Abdullah gimmick. And he went out there, won their battle royal. And I think it was with Piper. He had feuded with Piper for several months before he went back to Brooklyn, back to the Bronx. Yeah, good guy. Was just getting married. His second wife at the time, who he's still with, and going through when I came in there, and had been along, come up, lived. People don't realize those guys what a great living they had, living in the city like that, and working, working all around, and they screw up for the money lots of times, but they were, in those days, they're making good money. They're probably picking up, extra $5 a week, working around the different, because the payoffs were good. Skolin and Monsoon and all those guys were making all the local payoffs. So they, they weren't, everything wasn't going through the office. And there weren't all that many hands in the pot, just right out of theirs. So they were good, they had their $25, $75 nights. But they're having a lot of good nights too, and no traveling, living at home.
With Johnny, was he, as I imagine him to be, or maybe I've heard him to be, sort of like someone who you would be put with if the management thought that you needed your attitude testing?
Not when I was around. I mean, maybe earlier. It could be. Like I say, he was
maybe for like the younger wrestlers, I should say. I mean, you were obviously like established and everything, but for maybe the younger wrestlers, you were put with him and see where you were at, mentally.
Possibly, everybody knew Johnny could take care of stuff, but like we spoke earlier about the Bret Hart, the Tom McGee match and stuff. People were already you'd made your bones all around the world, around the country. And so you were in the New, I'll call it the New York territory. You're up there in New York to to get yourself over and to do anything. So there weren't places where guys were coming in to be tested by by Johnny Rodz or SD or other they'd like to see you, I'm sure, and they'd have and other guys that didn't have the full book on, possibly. But I don't know that Johnny ever hurt anybody or ever, took advantage of anybody. I never heard of that or never saw that, never saw it and never heard of it.
Well,
Johnny was...
Sorry, carry on.
No, Johnny was just straight goods,
With I mean, he ended up teaching a lot of people. Tommy Dreamer, Taz, quite a few names that were in the New York area, and a lot of them sort of filter into ECW. Was he?
Yeah.
I mean, you sort of alluded to it before. That he was like a pretty tough guy. I mean, was he just like straight amateur wrestling, or was he just street brawler, or he just knew how to take care of himself? Did he have like formal fighting training in that sense?
That I don't know. He was. He'd been on the mat with guys from. maybe around, post Skolin era. And all those guys are old, old salty guys. And, you saw Skolin work, it was nothing to rave home about. But, just, they're, down on the mat, right? So he came through, he came up that way. So if that was his background, and probably, down in Brooklyn and Bronx and stuff, where they had a lot of boxing gyms, wrestling and boxing gyms. So I'm sure he went both ways. He take care of himself. And like I said, I never heard where he hurt anybody or took advantage of anybody. Never saw it, never heard of it.